Laptops. Small, great, portable. But that comes at a cost in thermal management. See, when systems are under serious workloads, the CPU and GPU are usually giving off serious heat. That wouldn't be a problem for bigger PCs as they can fit heat sinks or even water cooling to deal with the temps. Laptops, on the other hand, don't have that luxury. They have to cram a lot of components into a slim package that still has to be portable, so managing temperatures can be a real pain. Heat is the killer of many laptops, both high-end and low-end, so one of the best accessories to combat this is a laptop cooler. Laptop coolers help to reduce temps by using fans to draw the heat away from your laptop and cool it down, increasing performance and promoting the longevity of the laptop. In the world of laptop coolers, you usually have three options. The high-end ones, which offer excellent cooling and extra features for a higher price, like the Inoue V12 or the K-Ben cooler. The mid-range laptop coolers without all the bells and whistles but still cool the laptop well, like the Havi cooler or practically any other mid-range laptop cooler. Or this, the bottom of the barrel. This is the notebook cooler pad made by 818, I guess, which I bought for less than $5. Any description about who actually made this thing is very vague. All we really know is that it was made in China and it's a laptop cooler. Apparently, it's the first, the worldwide, and the unique collapsible notebook cooler pad. Great. Opening up the frankly aged box, we find our cooler pad. Taking a closer look, we can see that it has a couple of rough edges. But it is collapsible, I'll give them that. It sports two tiny fans and a really weak looking USB connector. I'm guessing they expect you to plug it straight into your laptop or to a charger head to the mains. So let's just try that out. And yeah, it's spinning. It isn't spinning that fast. It's actually spinning kind of slow. I can feel cool air though from the sides and from the top. I don't really feel any significant changes in terms of the fan spinning. For this video, I'll just use the cooler plugged into the mains. And not only plug it into your laptop and boom, it's still going to spin up, and it's spinning probably at the exact same RPM because it barely uses that much power. It's not like the bigger laptop coolers that require a lot more power, which means it's going to have weaker performance, but at the very least it's a lot more accessible. You can plug it here, plug it to your laptop, into the mains, and it just works everywhere. So as long as you have a suitable USB adapter and enough charge, it's going to work as expected. It doesn't feel flimsy. You can see I'm using a little bit of force pushing against the base plates. It doesn't feel like it's going to break. Don't get me wrong, this is made from very cheap plastic. I mean, one of the pads for the structure is missing. Very cheap plastic, and I think two of the smallest fans I've ever seen on a laptop cooler, like ever. But yeah, it doesn't feel like it will break under the weight of your laptop. It feels like it could work well. So in order to test the real capabilities of this cooler, we'll be using my HP Victor 16 and a HP Pavilion X360 laptop. We'll run a demanding game on the Victus and compare the temperature and frames per second difference with and without the cooler, and then run a less demanding game on the Pavilion and do the exact same. If we see at least a minimal reduction and increase in temps and FPS, we can consider the cooler to have worked, and if not, then it's effectively just a fancy laptop stand. Looking at our Warframe home test, we can see that there wasn't a massive improvement in frames. Heck, all the frames using the cooler are actually slightly lower compared to the system without it. But in terms of temperature, we can see that there is a positive change. The temperature difference is here at nearly 3 degrees Celsius, which isn't a lot, but at the very least shows that the cooler is doing something. In our combat test, we see that the cooler finally managed to get an average gain of 1.3 FPS. Not a lot, but an improvement is an improvement. Looking at the temps reached, we can see that there was a much bigger change in temps for both the CPU and GPU, and we managed to reach a difference of over 8 degrees Celsius for our average GPU temps. All things being considered, the cooler worked okay here. Taking things down a notch, let's look at our home test for Crossout on the HP Pavilion. So in this test, we saw slightly higher frames in the min segments for the cooler, but the average and max differences for both tests were practically the same. Our temperature differences on the other hand were quite big. We were seeing temperature drops of nearly 10 to 16 degrees Celsius for the cooler, which is quite surprising. The averages for both the CPU and the GPU dropped by 14 and 10 degrees Celsius respectively, which is quite a considerable difference given what we are using. In our combat test, we saw an average improvement by over 1 FPS when using the cooler, and a considerable improvement in both max and min frames. Moving over to the temps, things sort of normalize. We are still seeing pretty noticeable differences in the max temps for both the CPU and the iGPU, but things begin to settle down at the min and average temps, with our average temp drops not really passing 3 degrees Celsius. Comparing the two, we can see that the frame differences for both laptops isn't that big in regards to the games being played. However, the temp differences are higher for the Pavilion compared to the Victus. This is probably because the Victus has catfish massive vents at the back and bottom for ventilation, and also because the laptop cooler is only really touching a small heat pipe section and the massive back plate, not even reaching the two fans. So differences in temps and frames aren't that big. The Pavilion, however, has a lot less space to work with. One fan is having to manage both the CPU and iGPU and dissipate heat through these tiny vents, so it greatly benefits from the cooling that the cooler gives, and also because the cooler nearly covers the entire bottom vent of the Pavilion. So, should you buy this? Short answer, no, but under specific circumstances, maybe. If you're using a high performance laptop, chances are they have vents the size of the Grand Canyon, so all you really need for effective heat dissipation is a stand or a mid-range cooler, or even a high-end cooler like the Ilano V12 if you run intensive software and want to see temperature drops and increase performance. If you're using a basic notebook, a laptop stand works just fine, and if you really need it, a mid-range cooler can usually solve any temp problems, unless you know your laptop can somehow reach the temperatures of the sun. But if you desperately need some cooling at a very cheap price and have a laptop with bottom vents that can fully utilize the cooling, then you could go for it. I'd advise you save up for something with more powerful fans though, as it won't skyrocket your frames, but it will at least make things a little bit cooler. I also can't say it will last for long though, because this cooler is not that strong. If you need cheap and small cooling at an extremely low price, it's probably your best bet. Or you know, a standing fan or an ice block. Okay. So yeah, that's the end of the video. If you stayed up until this point, thank you. I'm very grateful. This video was supposed to come out earlier, but due to complications, it came out much later than expected. However, I'm happy to see it done. I'm also really surprised with the HP Pavilion's performance. Crossout can be a pretty demanding game for these kind of systems at times, but it took it like a champ. Although the settings were set to very low and the render scale was also set to very low, it ran at a stable 30 to 40 frames per second, and I even saw 50 to 60 on much freer sections. It only really dropped in very intensive maps and situations, but after that it just goes right back to normal. I actually got carried away playing it because it was just that nice to play. I mean, don't get me wrong, the settings on it were low, and my HP Victus has much higher settings, like it's like RTX on, you know, all that pizzazz, but it just felt nice to play on. I'm coming from a place where I would average about 15, not even up to 30 frames per second on Crossout, and that's where everything turned all the way down. It's looking like a 90s game. So yeah, it was just nice to play. It was nice to see it working on an integrated GPU and CPU combo, you know, a low powered combo. It was just nice to see it play. So maybe, just maybe I'll do a full review of the laptop. Who knows? Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Sorry for no uploads in the past couple of months. It's been really busy and will probably keep getting busy. I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.